was, you know, suppose we had a national emergency. Suppose a terrorist struck again and a President Hillary Clinton or President Barack Obama declared martial law and in order to try to deal with this threat. And there was a private army of 20,000 soldiers that I could call upon to throw a ring around the Capitol and make sure that the Congress didn't leave town or didn't get back to the Capitol. I mean, how far-fetched is that?
Well, I mean, I was in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and I think we saw a real window into the possible future. I was standing on a street corner in the French Quarter on Bourbon Street, and I was talking to two New York City police officers who had come down to help. And this was just a couple days after the hurricane had hit. And this car speeds up next to us, no license plates on it. It was a compact car, and three massive guys get out of it. And they have M4 assault rifles, bulletproof vests, wearing khaki, wraparound sunglasses, baseball caps on. And they come up and they say to the cops, "Where are the rest of the Blackwater guys?" And my head sort of, you know, I didn't even hear the answer. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where are the rest of the Blackwater guys? So they get back into their vehicle and they speed off. And I said to the cops, "Blackwater? You mean like the guys in Iraq and Afghanistan?" They said, "Oh yeah, they're all over the place down here." So I said, "Well, I'd like to talk to them. Where are they?" And they said, you can go either way on this street," implying that they're everywhere. So I walked a little bit deeper into the French Quarter, and sure enough, I encountered some Blackwater guys. And when I talked to them, they said that they were down there to confront criminals and stop looters.
Who called them in?
And, well, this is an interesting story. Eric Prince sent them in there with no contract initially. About 180 Blackwater guys were sent into the Gulf. They got there before FEMA. I don't even know if FEMA's there yet, but they got there before FEMA, before there was any kind of a serious operation in the city at all.
On Prince's own decision?
Well, so Prince sends them in. Within a week, Blackwater is given a contract from the Department of Homeland Security Federal Protective Service to engage in security operations inside of New Orleans. At one point, Blackwater had 600 men deployed down there, stretching from Mississippi from Texas through Mississippi and the Gulf. They were pulling in $240,000 a day. Some of these guys, Bill, had just been in Iraq 2 weeks earlier guarding the U.S. ambassador. Now they're in New Orleans. They said, "Oh, we view this sort of as a vacation." One was complaining to me that there wasn't enough action down here. And when I talked to them, they told me they were getting paid $350 a day, plus a per diem.
By Homeland Security?
No, well, they're being paid by Blackwater. When I got Blackwater's contracts with the Department of Homeland Security, it turns out that Blackwater billed U.S. taxpayers $950 per man per day in the hurricane zone.
Profit margin of $600.
Well, I mean, the math on this stuff is always complicated because, you know, and Eric Prince and his men are very good at drawing up charts and sort of, you know, saying, well, there's this detail and this detail. The Department of Homeland Security then did an internal review, and they determined that it was the best value to the taxpayer. At a time when the poor residents of New Orleans were being chastised for how they used their $2,000 debit cards that often didn't work, the ones provided by FEMA. But what was even scarier than seeing the Blackwater operatives on the streets of New Orleans was I encountered two Israeli commandos who had been brought in by a wealthy businessman in New Orleans and set up an armed checkpoint outside of his gated community. And they were from a company called Instinctive Shooting International, ISI, which is an Israeli company. I mean, and I went up and I talked to them, and they tapped on their automatic weapons and said, you know, over in our country, when the Palestinians see this, they're not so afraid because they're used to it, but you people, you see it and you're very afraid. They're almost proud of the fact that I was sort of in awe seeing Israeli commandos patrolling a U.S. street, operating, in fact, an armed checkpoint.
I mean, once upon a time, companies and others hired Pinkerton guards,
Sure.
private guards, but never on this scale, right?
No, I mean, you know, it was like Baghdad on the Bayou down there in New Orleans. And, I mean, this is the point I'm making. The poor drown. They are left without food. They're called looters when they take perishable goods out of a store when they've been systematically neglected. The rich bring in their mercenaries to guard their properties or their businesses or their hotel chains. And I think it's a window into what happens in a national emergency in this country. The poor are left to suffer and die, and the rich bring in their mercenaries.